Welcome, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us. I guess I should say bienvenidos and buenos dias and buenos tardes and perhaps even buenos noches, depending on where you are in the world. But we are grateful for your taking time out of your busy schedules to be with myself and my compatriots in crime here today for our seminar entitled Andean Adventures, which we'll explain in just a couple of minutes. But it's a pleasure to have you all here for what is the final week as we all become slightly melancholy of ending our Full Circle Beverage Conference live at home. But our last two sessions will be happening this week, as well as a little bit of last minute yoga for those of you who need to stretch with Kat. And we should really have a terrific duet of sessions to finish on. Before we actually get started, I just wanted to say that once again, the benefit of all of these particular programs is that they are expounded upon not just by myself, by my compatriot in crime, who I do a lot of South American programming with, Patricio Tapia, who's joining us today from South America. But we have a truly rock star panel of vintners who are going to be joining us and coming in to speak about their specific wines and their specific appellations shortly. So really a treat today. While we're waiting for the last few people to join us, and before we actually get started, just a reminder about our housekeeping things. For clearly a lot of you, this is going to be a bit of repeating, and I thank you for indulging me as we go through it. For those of you who are attending your first session live right now, number one, please realize that you can join live, of course, as you are doing through the fourth radio button down on the right-hand side, but you're also able to join us later. All of these programs are being hosted, Zoom, if you will, sessions on the Thinkific platform, and you can go back and watch them at any time you want. Which is great. Hopefully some of you have taken the opportunity to look through the seminar overview at the top, which not only ensures you've got the right kit and the right wines and all that other good stuff, but gives you a little bit more insight into the topical matter at large. Some bios and absolutely stunning photos of my panelists and co-moderator Patricio Tapia, and a little bit of context. Please note that we will be having, as we always do at the end of our sessions, our happy hour, or so I like to call it our happy half hour because it's 60 minutes and 30 that follows this, and that will be off of a separate link, which I believe will be in your chat box, chat section as well, as having your own link for it afterwards. I encourage you to support the program, and you can support it in many ways. Not only being here now and being here in the moment, of course, is great, but staying engaged, asking questions during the dedicated Q&A period that we'll have at the end, filling out your surveys, which gives us valuable feedback as we move forward. Once again, although we do a lot of Zooms, we're still learning on our own platform and want to ensure that we're delivering content, wines, and quality the way you want. And then taste the wines that you receive. You know, one of the beauties of this particular format and by partnering with our sister company, Master of the World, is that we've been able to send out kits to 120 different people to fill in and taste in and online work with us through the mtwwines.com platform should you choose to, etc. And then lastly, as you can see on the bottom radio button there, all the tech sheets by session are available. So if the vintners don't spend way too much time reading the information that you can comfortably read in your own time on the tech sheets, please know that you can, and that they're going to be really spending more time engaging you on the live platform while we have it. As although I do mention that we're lucky enough to be able to ship out all of these wine kits to a number of you, we are well aware too that there was a lot more demand for wine than there wasn't. So we've structured our program, and I'm sure many of you are used to attending a number of Zoom sessions where you do not have the wines in front of you, and we're all very well attuned to addressing the wines, whether you have the wines to taste or not. If you do want to engage, there are really essentially two ways of doing so. One is through the Q&A feature, and all questions that pertain will be answered either live or on email, or perhaps even in the feature. So please go ahead and use it. We'll take care of addressing those questions. As I alluded to earlier, we do have a dedicated Q&A period put aside at the end. The chat box is, of course, a great place to engage informally, to talk amongst yourselves, to share thoughts, ideas, etc. It's very important. And again, I'm probably telling you most of you stuff you don't know already, but please check all panelists and attendees to be able to share comments with the greater community. If not, it just defaults to the panel. And while we're really interesting, probably a lot of you are equally more interesting. Mentioned earlier, all recordings of the sessions are posted after the fact. I know a lot of people are working or otherwise engaged and can't necessarily spend time with us live and in living color like you're doing right now. But the beauty of being able to go back is not only can you go through the sessions themselves, but if you do have the wines as well, taste the wines along with the session and still be able to do so. And finally, timing, y'all have been great about being on time. We're doing our best to make sure we finish on time, et cetera, et cetera. And then last of our housekeeping things, plan ahead. If you have had the opportunity to engage with at least one session through the Master the World kits, mtwwines.com, please do so. We encourage you not only to show you what we're doing there, but it really does help bring the programs to life when you do have the wines there. I'd really encourage you to get the jump start either the morning of or even a day before and gas the wines with private preserve or something in between. Don't try and do them as we're literally going through them on the spot, or you'll end up drinking drinking water out of a fire hose, as they say. There's tasting tips in the pre-seminar overview there. The leaderboard, for those of you who are competitive and want to play around and see how good your blind tasting skills are and everything, remains 608L. And you can join that off of the page there. And to encourage you all to participate, we are awarding prizes for people who do participate through the mtwwines.platform. There'll be a grand prize, which is a kit, which we will ship to you after the sessions are over, and 3 months of access to Somm TV. And then 2 additional winners will get the Blinders game, the Blinders card game, and then 3 months of Somm TV as well too. And then for those of you, you don't have to have wines, obviously, to participate in the sessions. And for the people that did attend either live or via recording, watching all 8 sessions, they'll be entered to win a drawing for an annual subscription to Master the World. That is, somebody asked me the other day, is that cool if I'm doing that from Canada or Germany or whatever? Unfortunately, the answer is we can only ship you in the US of A. So I guess that is a slightly delimiting factor, but that does open it up nevertheless for a full window. Thank you for indulging me all on the housekeeping here. And let's go ahead and get to the topic at hand. As the topical material suggests, our program today is called Andean Adventures. We're actually dividing it into 2, as we're going to learn in the minutes. The Andes is not dedicated to just a single nation, but multiple nations. Our sessions can be broken up into 2 sets of 3 wines. Wines 1 through 3 will be Chilean wines, and that particular session subject is going to be led by Patricio Tapia, who will join me in a moment. And we'll focus on wines from Ricardo Baettig at Morandé, Pablo Barros at Oveja Negra, and Sebastián Labbé from Santa Rita, with the sort of focus point of old vines in Chile. It'll then come over back to me, and I will lead us through our Argentinian section, where we'll focus in on micro, if you will. That is to say, micro in the sense of Uco Valley within Mendoza, and then micro, and then looking at sections within the Uco Valley proper. And I will be joined by Karim Mussi, Rodrigo Serrano, and Sebastián Zuccardi. 2 Sebastians, one from either side of the Andes. So they'll be bringing our programs to life. Now you'll recognize them when they jump up on screen as well. So Pato, I'm going to ask you to join me. Come back on video, come back on audio here. And I'm going to throw this gorgeous video shot for all of you to look at here. These are a portion, a very small portion simply on video or on photo here, but a portion of the Andes Mountains. And the Andes Mountains, it's hard to underscore the importance of this critical delineating topographical spine, if you will, of the South American continent. A lot of us have a tendency to associate it with the wine areas that we talk about, namely today in Argentina and Chile, but continentally, it crosses a lot of places. It covers a contiguous mountain region that touches, of course, Argentina and Chile, but also is important to the people of Bolivia, the people of Colombia, of Ecuador, Peru, and Venezuela as well. It covers almost 1 million square miles. You can see that, about 965,000 square miles plus, and is home to a large number of people. And if you look at those particular countries and add up their collective population base, 45% of those population bases of those countries live in these mountainous zones. The Northern Andes specifically is one of the most densely populated regions of the world for mountain areas. But even more so than that, and beyond the people whose lives it directly touches, a further 20 million more people have their lives touched as well, because at one way or another, they're dependent on the resources or the ecosystems provided by the mountains in the larger cities as they touch literally the Pacific coast and other parts of the continent. So it's really hard to underscore the importance of the Andes. We have a tendency, as I said earlier, to talk about it within the context of wine, but it's so vital at so many other points. So as we sort of now change the focus to wine, I'm going to ask Pato to talk a little bit about the importance of the Andes specific to us on wine. And Pato, please take it away, and welcome, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me here, Ivan. How are you? Are you
Terrific.
okay? Are you doing
fine?
Well.
Better now that I'm here with you.
Well, yes, if you have somebody in Argentina who is the right side of the Andes and who is the left side of the Andes, you know immediately the answer of that, of course. But yes, the importance of the Andes in Chile, we should start by saying that 80% of the country, of the land is mountains. So it's basically, we are a really Andean country. So and in Argentina it's different. It's a wider country. So they have more flatlands and of course the Atlantic. And one of the most important things about the Andes is the shape of the mountains in each country. In Argentina, let's say the slopes are gentler, so they can use the whole slope, well, not the whole slope, but most of the slope, by planting vines. And that's why in Mendoza, for example, you have vineyards planted in 800 meters above sea level, but also you have vineyards up to 2,000 meters above sea level. So they have a wide space to plant vines. And in Chile, in the other side, the slope is more dramatic. So we have the slope, and immediately we have the flatlands. So many of the vineyards in Chile are on 600, 500 meters and less, and there's just a few vineyards over the 1,000 meters, and some of them, a few of them are over 2,000 meters above sea level. So the topographic side of the Andes is really important. That's the first thing. And then, as you guys know, of course, as you go up, the weather gets cooler. The other day, I was in Mendoza, in Uco Valley, and I was driving a car, and we were going up in the mountains. It was incredible that, the 100 meters means 1 degree less. So if you go up, you immediately go 1 degree Celsius left. So it's as if you go up, it's getting cooler. And of course, that's have a big impact in the character of the wine. That's why people in Argentina said, for example, in songs like Luján de Cuyo, which is a traditional song in Argentina, and the fruit, the flavors of the wine tends to be riper and sweeter. But if you go up in places like Hualtallarí or Altamira, well, all of those places in La Consulta, all of those places in Uco Valley, which are higher, the flavors of Malbec or any other grape will be fresher, more red. So that's another big impact on the style of the wine. The same thing in Chile. Well, we have another, of course, influence, that is the ocean. But if you're in the Midland, and if you compare the flavors of both sides, the upper Andes in, for example, Alto Maipo, which is by the mountains, and if you compare that with Colchagua, which is in the lower land, you will say the same thing. In Colchagua, the flavors are sweeter, are rounder, and if you go to Alto Maipo, if you compare Cabernet Sauvignon, for example, it will be more herbal touches, and the fruit will be lighter and fresher. So the altitude is important. The same thing with light. The same thing with with light. The impact of light is especially, I mean, you can see it by the color. The color of wines in the Andes at high altitudes are much darker, and it's impressive. For example, the Cabernet Sauvignon from high altitude in Chile, and the same thing with Malbec in Argentina. So there is no right side. Both countries have different styles of wines. And I just came back from Argentina. I was spending like 2 months there, and I was impressed by the difference between terroirs, and the same thing in Chile. So there is a lot of, well, we will see some of those differences here today, but keep in mind that the Andes is one of the most important factors to understand South American wines today, especially in Argentina and Chile.
Great, excellent, Pato. I'm going to change the slide over now, and you're going to drive here for a little bit. We're going to kick off, as I alluded to earlier, with Chile, and speaking of wines, and speaking specifically with the topic of old vines. So I will move the slides, but I'm going to pull myself off camera so people can focus on your gorgeous self, and take it away.
Yeah, I'm going to try. Okay, great. Well, as you guys know, well, we will start with the 3 wines from Chile. But first, I would like to talk to you about the vines in the country. With Ivan, we always discuss about these 2 waves of vines coming to the South American, and specifically to Argentina and to Chile. In this case, Chile. As you know, grapes are not native in the Americas, and the same thing, of course, with Chile. And the first wave came in 15th and 16th centuries, and was with País, with the Spaniards. At the time, we didn't have any vine here, and so the first vines that we have was País, and as you know, it's Listan Prieto from Canary Island, and also Moscatel, from different origins, but mainly came from Canary Island too. So during almost 300 years, that was the main sources of vines in Chile. And some of the first wines that we used to drink, and we still drink, are made of País and Moscatel. So, well, also Pedro Jimenez and Corinto, but mainly País and Moscatel. Those were the most important grapes that arrived in Chile during those centuries. Well, the second wave changes everything, and so was the wave 2, the Bordelais grapes in the mid-19th century. And of course, Cabernet Sauvignon, Carmener, Malbec, all of those grapes. That supposes a big impact on the way we used to plant vines. And those first vines were imported by Chileans that traveled to Europe. They were amazed by the wine culture in France, and they decided to somehow copy that style of life, and so they brought some vines with them, and they decided to plant them mainly in the Central Valley. So they started to change País Moscatel with those new vines, Cabernet Sauvignon, Carmener, Malbec, Merlot, so on. So now the landscape is divided in 2. Mainly, you will find in the modern Chilean scene, you will find those old vines of País Moscatel in the south of Chile. When I say the south, I take I'm meaning like 200 kilometers. 100 miles something south of Santiago, you will start finding a rich heritage of old vine, País and Moscatel, while the other grapes are planted everywhere, but the oldest vines are in the Central Valley. And mainly, if you talk about Cabernet Sauvignon, for example, you will find it in Maipo Valley, which is one of the most classical valleys areas, where you can find some some Cabernet Sauvignons from the country. And there's a wave number 3 that came later on in 1939. We had this huge earthquake in Chillán, which is the south of Chile, and everything was destroyed. 30,000 people died during the earthquake. It was a really strong one. As we are a mountain country, and we are kind of used to that kind of how can I say it? How those events, natural events, and so the government at the time decided to import some of those some new grapes to plant it in Chile. Basically, a high yielding grapes like Carignan, Sanso. So right now we have old vines Carignan. We will have the chance to taste some of those grapes, some of those wines today, and we will see how it's going on. But the main thing is that we with those new, that's the latest arrival of Carignan, Sanso, and we have this broaden our heritage of old wines. So we can say that today, some of the best wines from Chile, some of the wines with more character, are made with those old wines of Cabernet Sauvignon, Carignan, and if you guys are more adventurous, probably you would like to taste also País, aka Listán Prieto, and some old wine Moscatel too. Okay, so Ivan, go ahead, please. Are you there? Great.
I'll put myself back on too, so I can jump back and forth with you. My apologies. I just want to make a quick little comment for those of my friends in South America who are reading this and are not understanding the context of the 2 peas. There's an American expression that you have 2 peas in a pod, sort of like coming together. So I had 2 peas. You can explain what the 2 peas are, and I put them in green like a pea pod. So that's just a little, as we would say, inside joke. But please go ahead, Pablo.
I still don't understand that joke, but anyway, sounds fun.
All right.
Great.
Do you want to go through the patrimonial and pre-phylloxera at all? Do you think to explain that a bit?
Yeah. No, I mean, let me first talk about the pre-phylloxera vines. In Chile, there is a lot of sandy soils, and as you know, phylloxera doesn't like the sandy soils. So that's one of the reasons that we have pre-phylloxera vineyards still in the country, and so you can find some pre-phylloxera vines with Carignan, of course, and of course with Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc, and all those Bordelais grapes. So that will be one of the reasons. The other reason why we don't have a phylloxera attack yet is that we used to be really isolated in the old times. We were still geographically isolated from the world. With the mountains, with the Andes, of course, and then in the north we have the desert. In the south we have the Antarctica, and in the west we have the Pacific Ocean. So in the old times, when communication wasn't like it is today, we were kind of isolated from this disease. In the modern days, the Chilean government is very strong with accepting, or entering or importing new vines. So that's probably the reason why we don't have the phylloxera. But as you guys know, many people could just bring some cuts on their pants, I don't know, and probably they didn't affect the vineyard culture in Chile because of these sandy soils. Many of the vineyards in Chile are planted on the flatlands, and the flatlands are rich in sun. So that would be my take on pre-phylloxera vines. What do you think, Ivan?
Yeah, no, I would concur with you. I mean, obviously that's a, for lack of better words, a reality of things. But I think what's also important when you think of the plant material itself. You know, today you call up your local nursery, you go to Entave down in southern France or whatever, you can kind of get anything that you want these days, and as far as plant material, source material, specific selections, clones, heat treated, etc. But what's really interesting about Chile is that the bulk of the of so much of your industry today has its roots, no pun intended, in plant materials that go back to pre-phylloxera times, which were essentially extinct in many parts of the world until the nurseries sort of rebuilt them back. So the whereas other people have post-phylloxera types of plant materials that are using as the basis of their material today, Chile still has pre-phylloxera there. The other P, and as you sort of people in the audience think about it, what are the things you should be walking out of here today with Chile on? The P's are important because P stands for pre-phylloxera, but P as well stands for patrimonial. And I think Pato alluded to the fact that there's this rediscovery of these classic criolla grapes that come back, which are part of the patrimony, part of the history of what's there and what's going on. So any other thoughts on patrimony before we
Yeah,
by the way, people, drink your wine, don't wait for us.
Yeah, that's a recent thing, you know, in Chile. It's no more than 20 years ago that we realized that we have this huge heritage of old wines. In the past, in the 80s or even in the 90s, I will say, probably in the early years of this century, this millennial, we didn't realize the importance of these patrimonial vines, and we consider that those Sanso, Carignans, and País, aka Criolla Chica in Argentina, were just for bulk wine, for wines without any quality, and wines that people in the country will drink it, but you know, the real Chilean wine were made or was made with Cabernet Sauvignon, with the Bordelais grape. So just as I said, that's probably less than 2 decades ago. Sorry, less than 2 decades ago. Some producers discovered those vines, and one of the first wineries to discover the potential of, for example, Carignan was Morandé. Morandé is going to be our first wine from Chile today, and then came other guys that came to Maule, to the south of Chile, and realized that Carignan was a pretty interesting grape. With beautiful acidity, with tough tannins, and a grape with a huge potential for quality wines. That was the first step in this and the rediscovery of patrimonial wines. And then came the next one 10 years ago, probably a little less than that, with Sanso. Sanso was called the cargadora in Spanish, which means a high yielding grape, and was used to make a huge amount of non-interested wine. And then came, for example, the Martino to Itata, which is further south of Chile, further south of Maule, and they start to make some really vin de soif kind of red, easy to drink, to quench the third wines, and that was the second discovery. And then came the Moscatel, which is fantastic, and some other obscure grapes that came together with País and with Moscatel. So there is one of the most, as a journalist, one of the most exciting things right now in Chile is the south and that beautiful heritage of super old vines. Sometimes they say 200 years old vines, but probably that's not true. But the truth is that the vineyard was established 200, 300 years ago.
Absolutely. 2 peas in a pod. See the joke that we will explain to you another time.
No, I still don't understand the joke, but go ahead, please.
All right, let's go ahead and bring on our first speaker. So please.
Yeah, well, the first wine, as I said, is Morandé Adventure Vinho. As I said, Morandé was one of the first wineries to discover the potential of Carignan, and Vinho is an association of producers that are focused on Carignan from all vines, dry farming vines in Maule. And I would like to invite Ricardo Baettig, which is the winemaker at Morandé, to join us and talk a little bit about this Morandé Back to 2017. Ricardo, are you there?
We got
Yep,
Ricardo's
here
moving
I am.
his camera around. Very impressive with that webcam.
Hello.
Hello, Ricardo.
How are you guys?
Great.
I'm right now in the cellar, so here I am.
Ah, there you are. Okay, great. I thought you were at a table. Great, perfect.
Here I am, guys.
You have a remote control for the camera. That's
very impressive,
Oh, yeah?
isn't it, Pato? Yeah.
That's super impressive. Yes.
Well, hi. Good to
enough
see
for a
you,
close-up,
Evan,
please.
Patricio, Limeng, everybody. It's very heartwarming to be here. So thanks for the invitation. Just to add some points to the Patricio speech, very, very interesting. Just to say that Chile is a very weird country. The narrow part of the country is just 55 miles. And the average of the wide of the country is 110 miles. So when you think the rivers in Chile run from the top of the Andes, which is roughly 20,000 feet high, to the Pacific Ocean. So it's a quite fast and not gentle, curvy meanders type of rivers. Because they are fed by the melting of the snow in the Andes, so carry a lot of stones. It's not the classical rivers like in Europe, you know, the Sena or Loire River. It's a kind of different type of geography here, very narrow and long country. So just to put some points in the explanation, in Chile we have 335,000 acres. And Carignan, the wine that we will taste now, is just 800 acres. So very little if you compare with the total production of the grapes in Chile. Cabernet Sauvignon is the more planted grapes in Chile, is 100,000 hectares. So Carignan is very little production in the Secano area. We call Secano the dry lands of the country. That means there is no channel for irrigation that were first building by the Incas. You know, the Peruvian native people, when the Spanish arrived, they reached Chile. They went until Biobío area, and they will stop by our native people called Mapuches. But the Incas developed all the basic channels for irrigation, and all the channels arrived to the mid of the Central Valley in Chile. The other half part, let's say the west part of the Central Valley, we call Secano because there is no channels irrigation, so we don't irrigate the vineyards there. And that's why the production is less. The density of plantation is also very low. If we think that we can have 5,000 plants per hectare in Chile, in the dry lands in the Secano, we have 2,000 vines per hectare. So a completely different way of production, the vines there. And we keep in these hidden and let's say forgotten areas of the country, the heritage of the Spanish viticulturism. So the bush pruning, no irrigation, let's say a little more poor but genuine type of viticulturism or agriculture, not like in Santiago near the Maipo river where all the French heritage was developed near the capital. Wealthy people were living there, so most of the, let's say, French-oriented Bordeaux wines come from the Maipo area in the south, center-south part of the country, where we keep all the traditions of the farmers of our our country. So Maule is one of them. Carignan was widely developed after the earthquake of 1939 in the Chillán, the main city there, as an effort to develop the economy of the area. So a little more cooperatives or big community sellers were pushed by the government to improve the economy in this area. And Carignan was one of the vineyards that the government tried to develop to improve the quality of the País grapes. So let's say it's arrived a little early. We don't know exactly when, but in 1939 and ahead was the big jump of the Carignan development in the Maule area. As I said, 2,000 acres of Carignan. I said 800 was hectares, so 2,000 acres of Carignan. And in Chile, 70% of the vines are a vertical trellis system, and just 10% is bush prune. The other is smart Dyson, another type, Lyra, other types of systems. And what else? And that's interesting. Maule have 22,000 acres of secano vineyards, and Bio Bio, the area of the Sansó, is 39 acres of secano. So most of the secano production, the bush pruning dry lands, are based on Maule and Bio Bio, specifically in Bio Bio. Now Ñuble area is Itata Valley. So the rest of the country, there is some dry lands, but most of these areas are irrigated. So this vino, we start making this one with harvest 2009. As you see, the alcohol goes up because the weather is quite warm and dry. And we are trying to do a fine tuning and understanding much better the vineyards of the secano in the last 10 years, I would say. It benefits a lot of aging in not barrels, even not new, but also not toasted. So we start doing that with French barrels, and then we change to untoasted or lightly toasted fulles, 4,000 and 2,000 liter fulles. We add some Syrah in the Carignan just to add a little more flesh in the blend. And this Chardonnay is just for fun because it's there, it's old, it's dry farm, and it's also like the Syrah bush prune. Both of them are grafted on País to be able to be on the DOC of Viño. So from our side is planted in the 50s, so it's nearly 70 years old vines, not rootstocks vineyards, very strong for the drought, very weak for the oidium fungus, but with this type of weather, it's very healthy and let's say almost organic vineyard. So that's our vino, high acidity, natural developed acidity, because the age of the vines. Very focusing red, juicy, sweet, sour cherries, flavors, aged beautifully. The first one we did not on Vino label, but we start making Carignan in Morandé. I would say maybe we're the first of the Chile doing that in 1997, and aged beautifully. I tasted that in 1997, and it's perfectly shaped and still good to taste. So any question, please? I don't know how is my time right now.
Your time is good, and thank you. We do two specific questions, and again, we'll have a big open question and answer period there. With specificity to older vines, you've obviously had the opportunity of working with both younger Carignan vines and older Carignan vines too. Clearly, the younger ones not making it into Vino, but your own experiences. What do older vines bring? If we were sitting down and we were tasting, maybe 20-year-old Carignan versus say 70-year-old Carignan, what would we see? What do the older vines actually bring to the mix of the wine's personality?
Yeah, I hear you a little far, but it's, I understand the main difference between the young Carignan and the old ones.
Yeah.
That's right. Okay, we also have in Maule new vines, let's say 5 years old vines of Carignan, and they're fruity, nice, but a little more diluted and less complex than the ones of the old vines. So I would say that it's a more complexity and more weight. That's the main thing to me. It's nice wines, the young vines, but a little more, let's say, silly or easy drinking wines, and the old ones have something else, you know, more richness, a little more complexity. Even when, to me, Carignan is a little one-dimensional type of wine, not like Cabernet, where it's a lot of layers of flavors and stuff. Obviously, old vines give a little of that and weight more.
And Ricardo,
Ricardo, still super fresh wines.
Ricardo, I have another question for you. So I've been drinking and tasting and drinking the Vino Carignan, Chilean Carignan for many years already, and I have seen a huge change in the style of Carignan. I would say less attractive Carignan. Can you please tell us a little bit of how things have been evolved during the last 20-something years in the history and the modern history of Carignan in Chile?
Yeah, it's a bit of a history of shame, because you know, Pato, very well that 20 years ago we produced the wines in Chile, or 25 maybe, like we do everything like the same in the way of vinifying. Pinot Noir, we do the same of Cabernet Sauvignon, etc. And we used to have Pinots with a lot of extraction, a lot of oak, etc. And the beginning, Carignan was a little the same, because we don't know how to manage that. We don't know that much at that time. We still are learning a lot. But Pablo Morandé, born in the Cauquenes city, and his family was from there. So we grow with Carignan, and he has a very clear idea how to manage that, to have a little more gentle and interpret better the Carignan. So we learn very fast that Carignan could be a little caustic if you do very hard extraction, or a lot of pump overs, and if you pick a little late, you will have a little overripe flavors. And also it benefits a lot on neutral or not toasted type of oak and aging. So if you see the first vinos, you will see they were quite similar, all of them. A little high alcohol, ripe, nice wines, but a little not. It was just 2 glasses or 3, and that's it. You know, you need a big lamb to finish the bottle. And now we were experienced in the a little more coastal side of the Secano. So lower alcohol, a little more focusing fruit and less extraction. Let's say more passive, like a bag of tea fermentation. Not too much pump over, just leave the skins to diffuse on the wine or on the juice passively. Exists that word in English? It's passive way. The flavors and structure, and not push a lot. And at the end, you have a much pleasant wines, in my opinion, of Carignan. And you can see this development, and most of the winemakers understand that and doing that way. Less is a very used phrase, but less definitely is more in Carignan.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I've been seeing that change, even, and you know, of course, you saw it too. There's a huge change in the style of Chilean Carignan in the last 10 years, and probably with more evident in the last 3 or 4 vintages. So, do you have any other question, Ivan?
No. I think we should keep moving on, but we actually get to continue on through the prism of Carignan a little bit with our next wine.
Exactly.
Thanks, guys.
So,
Thank you,
Ricardo. So the next one is also a Carignan base red, and also came from Maule, at this time from Cauquenes, which is the one of the main areas where you can find those secano, those dry farming Carignans from the Maule, from Chile, southern Chile. So with us is Pablo Barros. Pablo Barros is the winemaker at Oveja Negra, and this is the Lost Barrel. It's based on Carignan, but with something else. Welcome, Pablo. How are you?
Hello, Pato. Ivan, hello too.
Pablo.
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to me to stay today here with you and speak about the passion to make wines. You know, I want to say something that probably Ricardo doesn't take. It's in the soils of Chile. We have a lot of influence from the Balkan too. We have that give us in the soils a calcareum deposit and have a lot of influence, not just the colluvial or alluvial deposit. It's ruled by the volcanic origin too, and that give us a lot of influence on our wines too. In the story of the Carignan in Maule, it's important to say that when we begin to make wine from Carignan, in the first days we're over extract the wine. We get very hard tannins, and today we learn, or we try to learn every day how to deal with this power, with this strong character that Carignan can give us in the wines. Then when we begin to do the Lost Barrel, we design the wine like a blend between Carignan, Cabernet Franc, and Petit Verdot, three varieties that has a lot of personality. To deal with this all richness and personality, we focus to get old vines, you know, because when you get the old vines, you get the balance. For me, the wines on the vineyards, it's very similar to us, to the people, because when the vineyard get more older, between get the right balance, you know. Sometimes the human is we are not get the balance never, but it's with the time we try to obtain this balance that it's so important to get a good sensation, a good experience with the wine. In addition to Ricardo's speech, it's Carignan. When we discovered this, rediscovered that this wine, we're focused in the spirit of this wine, and this the Carignan bring us a lot of freshness, fruitiness, and when you have old vines, you have good balance. When we make the blend with the Cabernet Franc and Petit Verdot, and we leave the wine in old barrels, some part new, just between 30 or 40% of the wine goes to new French oak, and the rest is second, third, and fourth use, and we leave it for up to 16 months, but depends on each lot. The secret of the wine, it's the old vines. These grapes came from a specific place near to Cauquenes. The name is Ciénaga de Name. It's a really beautiful place, and the vineyards grow in bushes there, and all the treatment is organic. That it's and when you go there, you can see the agriculture that we are doing 100 years ago. You know, it's like a picture in the time.
Pablo, I have a question for you. It says on the technical detail, it says 61 Carignan and also, well, 22% Cabernet Franc, but also 17% Petit Verdot. Carignan is already a tannic, a rich tannic grape. Why do you decide to add 17% of another really tannic grape? What was why was taking that decision?
Oh, the Petit Verdot, even if it's very tanny, if you live in the right time on the barrels and then at the bottle, get very soft and very round, and then that give more middle mouth in
Maybe palate, yeah.
the structure of the wine, and give more long finish. That was the we tried different blend, and we choose the 17% of Petit Verdot for that reasons.
Yeah, it's funny because you're not the first one to tell me that that's the influence of Petit Verdot with Carignan, which is interesting. It's make the wine longer. It feels the wine longer. Well, Pablo, thank you so much for your wine and for the info that you gave us, and congratulations for your wine, of course.
Delicious.
Well, now on to the third one. We want to leave the Carignan topic, and we want to move on to the Bordelais grapes with one of the modern classic of Chile, and specifically from Maipo and Alto Jahuel, which is where the Santa Rita winery is based. And this Santa Rita Triple C is one of the main wines in their portfolio. So with us is Sebastián Labbé, head winemaker at Santa Rita. Hi, Sebastián, how are you?
Hola, Pato. Hey, Pato. Hey, how are you guys? Pleasure to be here. Fantastic. Yeah, what to say about Triple C, as Patricio said, it's a very important part of our portfolio. It is a wine that has a lot of history, you know, first vintage in 1997, and we have kept actually the same traditional style and varieties coming into this particular blend. The place, I think I want to concentrate more about that, the geography, the old vines, and everything we use in to make this particular wine. You know, we are located south of Santiago at the foothills of the Andes ranges, same kind of altitude what Patricio was saying, between the 550 meters above sea level and 700, the top vineyard. So it's not something dramatically high, but as you know, the Andes ranges here in Chile are very abrupt. So you really get to face up a very strong mountain range. And in the Piedmont and in the flat areas, it's actually where the vineyards are planted. We take advantage of that strong Mediterranean weather. You know, our summers are very hot, but we do have one great attribute, which I think is the proximity to the Andes ranges, which is basically that kind of refrigerator that acts because of the cold masses of air coming down into the vineyards, especially during the afternoon. The thermic oscillation or the diurnal range here in Chile, especially in the central area, it's very intense. Sometimes it can play a little bit, you know, sketchy, and it could be limited in some areas when the variation is too big. There are a lot of actually night processes that are a little bit stopped or slowly happening, and because of that diurnal range. But I think it adds something very particular to the acidity, to the freshness, to the aromatic development of the wines, and especially in this particular area and the varieties that we have chosen to be the main components of Triple C. You know, the Triple C, it's actually for Cabernet Franc, Cabernet Sauvignon, and Carmenère. in this particular case, they have that kind of a leafier, slightly more herbal, fresher side, also having the maturity of the riper tannins, a lot of red fruit, slightly probably darker fruit, I would say. But it's a wine that we're trying to merge, Cabernet Franc, a variety that the vineyard of Cabernet Franc here, it's 28 years old. So I wouldn't say it's a very old vineyard, but it's a matured vineyard. It's a vineyard where you already can see consistency. There is a vineyard that can add exactly that kind of a very aromatic intensity, a lot of flesh, but it needs something that I think the other two varieties are definitely adding. It's a one where all the components are adding something to it. The Cabernet Sauvignon definitely, builds the backbone. I think it really contributes to the backbone of the wine. And then Carmenere, that comes actually from further south, from the Uco Valley, in a fantastic site, which I think it's a magic place. It's a vineyard that it was planted in 1938. It's a dry farm, and it produces probably one of the fantastic Carmeners we have in the country. And that comes basically to round everything down, to balance the aromatic part that we have for the Cabernet Franc, the backbone that the Cabernet Sauvignon actually builds, and rounds everything with this percentage of Carmenere. And taking it to the old vines, I completely agree. I think it's there is a depth that actually you get to see in these wines and to taste, that it's pretty much related to that. And it's there are vines that are very mid to low productions. We're talking about probably between 5.5 and 8 tons per hectare, something between 3.5 and 3.5 tons per acre. So it's naturally a very concentrated vineyard that produces. I think they have a signature of this any particular block. Plus the climate and the area where they're coming from. And I think something that we have taken actually from the beginning, it's being very hands-off in the winery. These are wines that are very traditional in terms of the winemaking. It's I think Triple C, it's a blend that has a very beautiful aromatics. It's got a very intense mouthfeel and texture, but it's a wine that, even though having a really nice mouthfeel, it's a wine that is very fresh, and that it keeps that kind of a mouth-watering flavors. And I think that's what we basically have been looking for since 1997 on the first vintage, and that's what we kept doing, in 2015, which is basically a warm vintage. And I think the wine is still showing that kind of a presence of being, with the heart in the Andes ranges, and having that kind of 3 varieties, trying to get concentration, elegance, and also freshness, which I think it's very important for this style of wines.
People talk a lot about sorry, Ivan. People talk a lot about of Argentinian Cabernet Franc, and there's this beautiful new wave of tiny but really strong community of new Cabernet Francs coming from Uco Valley. But in Chile, we don't really care much about Cabernet Franc yet. What do you think about the potential of Cabernet Franc in Chile, and specifically with the Andes mountain influence? And as I see here, that's 65% Cabernet Franc in the mix.
Yeah, I think it's it's a variety that I personally like a lot. From Argentina, from the old world, and from either in Chile, in different places, you can produce some great wines in the in the Maipo Valley, but also you can find some interesting stuff in closer to the coast, where most of the granite soils are. Sometimes you probably, it's a variety that I think it's very edgy. It has that kind of very aromatic borderline of being slightly vegetative and ripe, but I think that kind of leafy character, that kind of graphite notes and the aromatic fragrancy that it has, it's a beautiful variety. We are personally planted more and more, even in Altocedro, and also in another area called Pumanque, for example. But I think it's a variety that, if you go back actually to other vineyards, in some old vines, there are still some Cabernet planted. So I think it's a beautiful variety, and I see huge future for Chile.
Great. Well done. Thank you so much, Sebastián. Now it's time to move to the other side of the Andes.
Well, we're at the foothills of the Andes, so now we just need to cross over. Thank you so much, Sebastián.
Thank you, guys. See you soon.
Many people share your excitement for Cabernet Franc, not only in Chile and Argentina, but across the continent. I really think it's a signature variety for the entire Andean range, if you will. We're going to talk now about Uco Valley. And for those of you who are old enough to remember Buffalo, Springfield, yes, there's something happening here. But in this case, what it is exactly clear. Pato alluded to earlier that when we all started learning about Mendoza and my first trips down to Argentina, certainly some time ago, more energy was focused on getting you excited about what was going on in Luján de Cuyo and in Maipú specifically. And there was a lot of discussion about Uco Valley, but it was sort of emerging. It was coming up, if you will, and we'll learn in a minute that it was there in many cases for a long time. What's been particularly interesting over the last, again, say 15 to 20 years is this sort of reemergence, this resurgence, and this more site specificity. So if we went from Mendoza to learning that Mendoza was the most important part of Argentina in terms of volume, and certainly for Malbec as a variety, then we learned a little bit more that you had two parts. You had closer to Mendoza City in Maipú and Luján de Cuyo, and you had Uco Valley. Then we started shifting more towards, understanding those subzones more, whether it was Agrelo and Luján or, the areas of Uco led by Tupungato, et cetera, et cetera. And now what we're really learning over time is this more stratified micro focus within the zones themselves in places like Tupungato, in La Consulta, and in Paja y Altamira, which are going to be our three focuses today. But lest it not be said, whether you're looking at Maggie's gorgeous graphic there on the right, which in and of itself is incomplete. There's more and more zones, subzones, and as we'll learn as we talk a little bit about Guattaraji later, even specific crus and terroirs which are emerging. So there's definitely a sense of a new growth and a new system and a new subspecificity. We have the luxury of not only looking at it in those three zones with three great winemakers and three great wineries, but through the prism itself of a variety in Malbec, which very much like, say, Zinfandel in California or Pinot Noir in Burgundy, tells the story of a variety through the provenance from which it actually comes up. So I'm particularly pumped about this. This was an area that I was really excited about, and I'm gonna leave it to people who know better. So we're gonna start, if you will, in Paja y Altamira. Now, Altamira was probably one of the first places that a lot of you did learn about. It got its GI in 2013, but it was certainly before 2013 that a lot of us learned about it. Probably a lot of you learned about it specifically through Acheval Ferrer with their Finca Altamira in 1999. What's important to know, however, is that they actually trademarked it. So the only way to get a GI there was to put Paja or place Altamira in front of it. And that is what the GI is. So the GI itself is not Altamira. And if you've been, God forbid, passing bad information around, please make sure you're saying Paja. It's a fairly large area, but what's interesting about this alluvial rich zone is that diversity of stones and sand, and specifically of limestone. Its altitudes a little bit higher, you get delicate, cleaner, and I would say grittier wines, and also a very unique personality, to the point, like Pato talked a little bit about Vino before, you have this group that's emerged over the last couple of the years called Pipa, which is the Vino of Paja y Altamira, if you will, specific independent producers from Paja y Altamira. To lead us through a discussion of Altamira and of his wine specifically, I'm delighted to have with us Sebastián Zuccardi. And Sebastián, if you want to come and join us and talk to us a little bit about your wine and a little bit more specifically about Paja y Altamira.
Hello, Ivan and Pato.
Hi.
Thank you. As you know, the conditions first in this side of the Andes are different than the conditions in the other side. Where we live, we have no any ocean influence, and really the mountain create the conditions where we cultivate, because the mountain isolate us from the ocean, give us the possibility of altitude, and like Pato say, every time that you go up, you are moving to a cooler areas to cultivate, but also give us a lot of light, because we live in a desert that we have more than 300 days with blue sky and with not a lot of sun filtration. So the interesting thing is that we can cultivate in cooler areas with a lot of sunlight. In general, when we think in cooler areas, we think in cloudy and wet. In our conditions, because the mountain, we have a different possibility. The second is the water, and the third is the soils that you say. All the soils where we cultivate are alluvial soils. What happened in the Uco Valley specifically is that we have all this influence with a lot of energy, because we are closer to the Andes. And many years ago was enough to talk about Argentina. Then we understood that we had to divide in areas, and we started dividing. And today, when we go to the Uco Valley, because the difference of altitudes and the difference of soils because the way that the soils were formed is alluvial, but we have a big variation on depend if we are close to the Andes or far from the Andes, but also depend of the origin, because the Andes mountain has a very complex geology. So we can divide the Uco Valley in villages. And one of the villages that we have is Paraje Altamira. And Paraje Altamira, as you explained, is in the south of the Uco Valley, where the mountain close near to the valley. So the highest possibility to cultivate in this part of the valley is 3,600 feet, because then you have the Andes. And one of the most interesting things is the soils, because we have a very strong alluvial fan, and this alluvial fan move really big stones. But these stones are inside with granite and covering with a layer of calcium carbonate with calcare. So also we have a unique combination in terms of soil. The wine that we are tasting is made with Malbec. That Malbec is our best vehicle to express our places, and we have been working in Argentina with Malbec for many generations, and we have a Malbec that is prephyloxeric and is a massal selection, and really was the work of many generations. And Polígonos in particular is a range where we talk about these villages. So we make one wine from Paraje Altamira, another wine from Gualtallarí, and another wine from San Pablo, all with Malbec. In this case, we have Paraje Altamira Malbec 2019. And because we believe that the future of Argentina is in the places, and we want to make wines that talk about the place, the challenge is during the vinification, try to avoid overripe and try to avoid over oak. So the wine was fermented and aging in concrete, looking to leave that the place express.
Nothing.
Sorry.
No, nothing. I wasn't saying anything.
No, okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. No. The explanation is this. So this is a wine that talk about the Uco Valley, the south of the Uco Valley, about the village that the name is Paraje Altamira. That is very special because how close is from the Andes and this alluvial soil that has this unique combination of granite and calcare. And this gives a lot of texture in my way to see the wine. And our challenge when we make the wine is try to make in order that can have this texture that come from the soils.
The one question I wanted to ask you, Seba, before we move on is I was just tasting the wine, and clearly you have the wonderful inertness, if you will, of the concrete that's not giving you any of the oak influences, tannic-wise, flavor-wise, oxidatively, or whatever. There is a sort of a soft grittiness to the tannins here. Is that unique to the Altamira compared to, say, other Malbecs you would find in different zones? Is there a quality of the tannins there that's special, or is that just specific to your wine?
You have some areas in the Uco Valley where you have a very special tannic structure and texture, especially because in Altamira or in San Pablo or in Gualtallarí, you have a lot of calcium carbonate in the soils. And in my way to see, this gives a lot of texture to the wine. But then it's a challenge, and it's our way to cultivate that we want to reduce the sweetness and push up this texture. So we have a place that have these conditions, and Paraje Altamira is one of them. But then our work in the winery is try to take care of this. And in my way to see, and in Malbec is a little sensitive to oak and also to microoxygenation. So it's for that I prefer to do the fermentation, but also the aging in concrete, because I avoid any flavor or any taste, and I reduce a lot the microoxygenation. And with this, the idea is to keep the tension, the energy, and the freshness.
Mm-hmm. No, and it's true. And I don't know for all of you who are out there, but when I've had this wine, the pleasure of having this wine on a couple of occasions, and when you open it, it can be a little bit reductive because of that. But when you swirl it, the wine just explodes with beautiful flavor, and it is such an expression of purity and of place. And I'm so glad we have used it as a wine to start off with. Thank you so much, Sebastián. We'll have you with us again. I'm sure a lot of people have questions later. So we're going to move now from Paraje Altamira, and we're going to go over to La Consulta. Now, La Consulta is another striking area. It's relatively small in comparison. Sits in the shadow of the Great San Jose volcano, and it's surrounded by vineyards, particularly in the western slide. And what's interesting here is that, you know, we don't talk so much. We just talked about old vines in the context of Chile. When we talk about the Uco Valley, we talk about it, as Pato sort of alluded to, in the last, you know, couple of decades, or my own experiences in the past couple of decades. But you do have places, you do have plots. Remember how wine came to Argentina over the Andes and therefore settling down, where there are vineyards that are 100 years old in many cases. A lot of the concentration of them is going to be found here. You also have the distinction of the Tunujan River flowing through the middle of the area, which provides some contextual relief from the dry heat that you ever get. Once again, because of that river, largely alluvial soils, and together, effectively, these places make La Consulta one of the coolest, and I say both literally and figuratively, places that you have here. And I think for when people are sort of saying, Evan, what should I remember about a wine being quintessentially Uco Valley in terms of fruit structure, volume, intensity, and architecture, La Consulta is a place that I often think of as being one of those spots. So we're pleased to have with us today Karim Mussi from Altocedro, who's going to talk to us a little bit more about his wine, and again, specifically La Consulta. Karim, please.
Hello, everybody there. I'm Karim Mussi, winemaker and owner from Altocedro Winery. So we're glad to share this wine with you, and also this presentation, especially talking after my friend Sebastián, that we are very close here in Mendoza, but talking about different places. Altocedro is a family-owned, terroir-driven winery that was established in 1998. My family bought that property and started working there in the 80s. And then I decided 22 years ago to start this born and raised project based in La Consulta. La Consulta, Altamira, and many other places of the Uco Valley were very famous before for local growers and producers, but mainly to send those grapes to the big wineries here in Mendoza. So for years, those AVAs or those locations were not commercially known by the market, but thanks to the proximity to the river and the blessing conditions that we have in the Uco Valley, the knowledge, the experience, the material that we have in that area, specifically, or thanks to the families, the Italian families that established there many years ago, we have more than 150 years of modern winemaking. That is something very important for us, because it's not a new area. It's maybe a new area to discover, but not a new area to develop. There is a lot of history. There is a lot of information. There is a lot of quality things that were established there many, many years ago. So we took advantage of all these things that we have in that place. We refurbished a very old winery that has more than 100 years, taking advantage of the concrete tanks, the small concrete tanks that we use for our fermentations. Everything is gravity fed and fermented with indigenous yeast. So under those concepts and winemaking dogmas, we established the Altocedro winery, especially going straight to the source where we could find those double P's, the Pre-Phylloxera patrimonial vines, original rootstocks that we had available in La Consulta. So that was the shortcut to the identity, and this wine was a good example. The first vintage was in 2001, and we are still producing the same amount of bottles, sourcing the fruit from the same old vines, trying to keep that identity and that heritage from the Pre-Phylloxera rootstock that came to Argentina in the 19th century. So this wine, it has a classic fermentation. It's a very traditional style, closer to the classic Argentinian winemaking education. It has it's a classic fermentation, classic aging, and it is a very limited production. So since 2001, since the first vintage, we have been keeping and proving that specific flavor of La Consulta, despite the area and the ABA that we started the official registration in 2003, continue growing in terms of recognition and quality reputation.
Karim, sorry to interrupt, but talking about that specific topic, we're tasting two wines from the south of Uco and in San Carlos. And if somebody asks you in terms of flavors, what would be the main difference between La Consulta and right to the west, Altamira? What would be the main difference that they will describe in terms of Malbec, for example?
Well, in La Consulta, where you have three more sub-appellations that are completely different from Altamira, the thing is why Altamira or how Altamira is so different from the rest. Because Altamira is the very close to the river, where you have almost no soil, very short soil, very stony. Sebastián explained it very well as the main characteristics. So Altamira is about concentration. Altamira is about those big, rich, full wines that you can obtain very easily, but then you can keep it and promote that specific profile thanks to the aging or the no aging, like Sebastián did with Concreto. It's about the pureness of the fruit, the pureness of the expression that you can reach in that specific area. Well, in La Consulta, because the soils start getting deeper and more loamy, you can find different profiles that provide a richer and more diverse identity in terms of expression. While Altamira is maybe the more specific character that you can obtain in this very unusual corner that is right beside the Tunuyán River.
Great to get that. Yeah, I'm agree with that differences, and it's pretty clear when you taste the wines. Well, thank you so much, Karim, and don't forget you owe me a asado, a barbecue next time.
We owe many asados during the pandemic, so don't worry.
I want in on that asado. I want in there. No, thank you, and I think it's really important. And thank you for asking that question, Pato. As we look at these now increasingly focused subzones, to understand, what are some of the markers there? What are some of the differences within that? And as I mentioned earlier, I always find La Consulta to be sort of what I consider classically, quintessentially Uco. And then lastly, we're gonna finish in another important area, and that is Gualtaraí, or Gualtaraí, or Gualtajarí, if you.
Gualtajarí, Gualtajarí.
Gualtajarí. Okay, I always get that one kind of messed up. That's why I have you here always to correct me. But it's interesting, when I first made my first trip down into Uco Valley, this at the time was the place that everybody was really talking about, the so-called it girl of the moment, with her 5,000 acres of tremendous wines. What's interesting here is that your height is as much a defining factor as anything else, and that higher altitude, as Pato mentioned earlier, equates to coolness there, and the coolness in the area always, to me, expresses the aromatics, the herbal characteristics, the minerality, and almost sort of a tacit salinity in those wines. And then, of course, you have alluvial soils with the rocks and the sand and the chalk. What's very interesting to me here, and perhaps between Pato and we can move on after this too, is that there's like individual wines and individual parcels here. And I put a picture of the Monasterio parcel to the far right there by the arrow, that are starting to gain almost cru-like reputations here, whether it's, one of the great Catena wines, Zuccardi's Alluvional, Polignos, etc. There's a lot going on here. And this, I think, is a specific element worth following as we move forward. So obviously with each wine, we've got a person talking. I am delighted that Rodrigo Serrano is here from Domaine Bousquet to talk to us a little bit about his wine and talk to us a little bit about this area's Malbec. And in the question, actually, his is the only wine that's a bit of a corte with a little bit of Cabernet and Merlot and Syrah in it. Please, Rodrigo.
Hello, thanks, Evan. Hello, Patricio. Thanks for the participation in the webinar. We are really happy for share time with you. So, how do you say? We are in Gualtajarí. We are a pioneer in Gualtajarí area. In 1997, Jean Bousquet bought around 400 hectares in Gualtadari and start with the project. Nobody were here in Gualtadari. The family told that Jan, are you crazy, Jan? Nobody is there with vineyard. What are you doing? And the project started in 1998. He bought some plants from France and start with the Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, Cabernet Sauvignon, and Merlot, because Jan think the Gualtadari is an amazing place for sparkling wines. And after a few years, he decided bought some Malbecs and started with Malbec too. The plant from Mendoza cultivate around 1998 too. So I started with the adventure, and we are here now. As you know, Evan, we are the largest Argentinian organic producer of wine made with organic grapes producer. We are in the Tupungato. So the winery is owned and management with for Anne in this moment, and Bousquet and her husband, Labbé. So all our wines are with the French style, but making in Argentina, you know. So in this case, our Malbec is our Grand Malbec, our Grand line are wines with the best parcels of our vineyard. We chose the best parcels, and we make a really special vinification. We make a vinification in stainless steel tanks. After this, we continue with the conservation in barrel during 12 months. So I really respect wine process. We don't make a lot of intervention. We are always looking for the natural, elegant wine. So in this case, how do you say? We make a blend. It's not 100% Malbec. We make a blend with 5% of Merlot, Syrah, and Cabernet Sauvignon, because we want to show the potential of the Gualtadari, and we want to make a different Malbec. We don't have a monotonous. Don't want to make a typical Malbec from Gualtadari. We want to make a special Malbec, and for this we make a blend. You know.
And Rodrigo, so we were just in the south of Uco, and now we move to the north of the appellation in Gualtadari. So what will be the flavors of the place? Because many people say that, for example, in Gualtadari, the tannins are really strong, but the aromas are wild. What would you describe a generic Malbec from Gualtadari?
A generic Malbec for me, from Gualtadari, are really soft in the palate, you know, and you can find a lot of fruit and a lot of flowers in the nose. In my opinion, everybody have the same concept that you, Patricio, but in my opinion, always say when you taste a wine from Gualtadari, you have a lot of potential, but one really good characteristic from Gualtadari is you can drink the wine today, or you can wait the wine for 5, 7, or 10 years, and the wine have a lot of potential, you know. I think it's for the soil. We have a sandy soil, and I think this part of the terroir is really important. The high altitude, the cool condition, and the sandy soils are really important for you have a grape with a lot of concentration, but the concentration is not really hard. Always in our vineyard we can find the sweet tannins, and this is really good for us.
Yeah, you guys in Gualtadari are working in IG and a new IG, and you guys are dividing the whole Gualtadari in different zones, and it's amazing how different how many Gualtadaris they are in right now. And as Ivan was saying, Monasterio is this chalky, the most calcareous part, but also there's the sandy and the highest part of Gualtadari. Well, so there's a lot of things to talk about Gualtadari. Thank you so much, Rodrigo, and congratulations for your wine. And I hope to see you again. And the same thing with Karim, to you. You owe me a great asado, Argentina asado. So next time I'm there, please don't forget that.
Big asado party in Argentina, it sounds like here. Well, we have a few minutes left. We might run over just a couple of minutes. Thank you, Rodrigo. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Our pleasure. And bring everybody back on. And Limang, if you'd like to facilitate a few questions for everybody before we move forward, that would be great. You're muted.
We're not gonna have time to go through all the questions. So whatever we don't answer now, if those of you who want to join us, the happy hour will answer there, and we'll certainly send it out in the Q&A document as well. I'm gonna go back to Ricardo from the very beginning. You had said that in your assemblage there is Chardonnay. We have several questions about that. What is the reason for the Chardonnay? Can you comment more about this use of white grape in the assemblage? Is it common? And are you co-fermenting?
You could jump back on. Yeah, thanks, Ricardo.
Hola. Sí, aquí estoy otra vez. Oh, sorry, in English.
In English, Ricardo.
Much better in English, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Love it.
Yeah, in the beginning, I explained to somebody, Evelyn, I can't remember, somebody who asked me that. Actually, when we started with Vino in vintage 2009, that was our first Vino, we used to produce another 100% Carignan in our portfolio. So we had 100% Carignan wine and also Vino. So to make a fairly different wine between them, we decided to co-ferment Chardonnay and add some Syrah in the Vino with well, for the purpose of not have the same wine because Carignan is very unique in terms of you feel it right away. So if it's a lot of Carignan or pure Carignan, even from different vineyards, will be quite similar. So, and then we stopped to make the 100% Vino, Carignan, sorry. And we left the Chardonnay because it wasn't, let's say, recipe, and add a little more floral and softer the tannins of the Carignan at that time. But I stopped to use it in vintage 2019. So the last Vino with Chardonnay is the 2018, and then we stopped it because we just kept one wine to keep a little more Carignan focus wine. I just left the Chardonnay out.
Great.
And was also for fun, you know, because we could. And that was the reason.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ricardo.
I have a few more questions, and we're gonna go quickly so that Sebastián from Zuccardi, can you just answer the question on whole cluster? Why use whole cluster?
And can I add something to that question? In the past, the problem with the standardization in Argentina was the oak and the over ripeness, Sebastián. And there are some people saying now that another risk of standardization in the new wave of Malbec is whole cluster fermentation. What do you think about that?
Me?
Yes, you.
I think that whole cluster is a tool, or is part of the expression that you are looking. For example, in my case, I don't vinify Gualtallarí with whole clusters, but I do in Paraje Altamira, because I feel that in Paraje Altamira help a lot to build the backbone. I believe that if you use like whole bunch and you can have a little bit of carbonic maceration, is more dangerous, because carbonic maceration is a flavor of a technique of vinification. But in our case that we crash, I think is less the risk of standardization. And I use in places where I think that works better. And Paraje Altamira sometimes, because I believe because the altitude, the whole cluster help to improve the backbone.
Great. Thank you, Sebastián. I have one question I'm going to throw at Karim and Pablo, since you guys haven't answered questions yet. And this was a question about climate change. And then this is the last question before I hand it back to Evan, and William will get your answer for your question in the happy hour. So the question for Karim and Pablo, what challenges are presented to you by climate change in your areas, in Chile and in Argentina?
Please,
Answer for your region, obviously.
Up to you.
Well, thank you. Well, we are facing the same challenges that all my colleagues here are having, both sides, both hemispheres. Specifically in La Consulta, where we are used to the cool climate conditions, maybe the risk of frost is reducing, especially the late frost that we used to have in September. And now the early frost are close to the harvest, and we are having or experiencing more hailstorms. This is something that I've been noting and consistently happening year after year. And the other thing is the ripeness. It's coming very fast. That in some way it helps us to organize the harvest, the picking better, and all the whole program harvest together. But for certain varietals, specifically in La Consulta, where we are allowed to grow early ripeness Tempranillos with late ripeness Petit Verdot or Cabernet Sauvignon, it's bringing some issues to organize the harvest. And then for the quality of the expression, the freshness and acidity is not something that is affecting at the moment, fortunately.
That's great, thank you. Pablo and then Sebastián from Santa Rita, if you want to add a few words on global change also.
For us, the challenge is to be very focused on the ripeness of the fruit, because with the climate change, we're getting early ripeness, and we need to be very attentive to that point, to not lose the freshness, the natural acidity, the fruit on the wine, on the grapes, and not get over ripe, and lose quality. That for me, it's the main problem, and the other thing is get a relationship with the irrigation. This last year was very dry, and need to take care of the balance and the water balance in the vines too.
Great.
Yeah, and just to add something from our side, I think, yeah, that's definitely the challenge we're facing. It's climate change, it's happening, we're experiencing. We don't know it's going to be like, there's no way back, or probably we're going to see something happening in the future that it goes back again. I think it's a real challenge instead to start actually farming our vineyards in a different way, especially to hold water in the soils a lot better, which I think it's in a better way. I think that's a big challenge in terms of actually weed control, and encourage a little bit more cover crops, and include more organic matter to be more efficient actually with irrigation. I think in dry farming that's a little bit more solved, but anyway, we've got to make sure that the water stays actually in the soil for at the appropriate time. But it's also an opportunity, because actually in this part of the world, it faces up to start pushing to new appellations and new areas. So we are discovering new possibilities actually for growing grapes in places where we're not growing grapes yet. So I think it's a double functioning problem, that opportunities, but also challenges.
Yeah, great. Well, Evan, I think back on to you, and everybody, especially the winemakers here, if you can join us in the happy hour. There were some questions about food and wine pairing with your local cuisine. It would be interesting as you move to happy hour with us to think about what suggestions you have. Evan?
Great. Yeah, just a final reminder, with some sadness, we have our last seminar this Thursday. Just a reminder to join us for Alentejo. We'll be shifting grapes, and focus is here. And lastly, just once again, a big muchísimas gracias to all of our speakers, panelists, our myriad sponsors, and thank you for doing your evaluations. And as Limang said, please join us in the happy hour now for a happy half hour for some more questions for those that didn't get answered, other questions you might have organically, and to find out which people are having an asado that we need to go to with Pato when we come back. So see you all in happy hour.
See you guys. Thank you for coming.
The seminar. Appreciate
See
it.
you guys later.